Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive. The forest lay dormant. The wind was almost not noticeable. Narrowing your eyes, you fell through the soil. No movement either. Strange. There was normally so much activity in the forest. Running animals, chirping cicadas, singing birds, the creaking of old trees. No, there was nothing. Leaning forward over your bulb, you pressed an ear to the ground, spilling some of your nectar, but that was okay. But outside of the crunching of dirt from worms and your own roots, nothing either. You hissed defensively. You definitely didn't like this. And in response, you pulled up your petals, closing your flower, and using your roots and vines to scout what was happening around you. You shuddered. There they were, small tremors of people walking. How many pairs of feet were there? 1 pair, 2 pair? You furrowed your brows. Judging by the rhythm, 2 of the things approaching you had 4 legs. Scared, you looked around inside your bud. You were an ambush predator. Sure, you could take on 1 puppet, maybe 2 in a direct fight. After all, you were just a plant. But so many, that was too much. Using your strength, you retreated your roots to the forest clearing that was your home. Meanwhile, at the other end of the forest, Wally Darling, together with Barnaby B. Beagle, Howdy Pillar, Eddie Deer, and Frank Frankly, were approaching your location. Wally was chipper, knowing the other men haven't seen who he had considered his girlfriend just yet. They were on a mission the entire neighborhood was right now working on, and that was relocating you to a park near home so you could be closer to the other puppets. They brought shovels, spades, and even a large cart that was already filled with a thin layer of soil. The cart was being pulled by Barnaby, who had it safely secured around his hip as he pulled it on all 4s through the forest's soft grounds.
To be frank, I'm still not sure I believe you, Wally,
muttered Frank loud enough for the painter to hear as he led the men deeper into the forest. Wally turned his head and smiled. But you're still coming with me? Frank growled.
Nah, that's only because Eddie asked me to.
Let's assume Wally isn't going nuts. We would need all hands on deck, said Eddie with a jolly tone in his voice. The mailman was just happy to be here and get out of the scary northern forest for once.
A plant that size would not only just barely fit into the cart, but also, as a predatory plant, would require a lot of meat to sustain itself, so much that it is a wonder it hasn't eaten us yet.
Wally blushed. There was something else you were eating for sustenance, and he wasn't mentally ready yet to tell the men that just yet.
Frankly, I just want to say I told you so, painter.
Yes. The men were so deep in the conversation they had all failed to notice the vines and roots vanishing beneath their feet, as they were making out their position and destination. Guys, I'm getting hungry, yawned Barnaby. Don't worry, Barnes. When we get home, there's a huge barbecue. Why else do you think I let the others stay back? The others being the other 3 denizens of home. They were currently digging the hole you would later be placed in, and then start cooking a barbecue for everyone to enjoy. Ah, so that's why you ordered so many hot dogs 2 days ago, Wally? Why didn't I think about them myself? Chuckled Howdy Pillar, the owner of Holmes' General Store. Hot dogs, yummy. Precisely. Well, I might not believe in that plant either, but I already love her, even if she's not real. Wally sighed internally. He should have taken pictures of you, not just the painting he did. But he was glad the others were here with him. Alone, this was impossible. Finally, the clearing came into view. The huge pink flower right in the middle being instantly recognized by the other puppets.
Wow.
Guess you aren't nuts. I wonder how many jars of honey that thing can produce in one summer. I'd be rich. Howdy, you and I know quite well that the moment I make a good joke, all of that honey is mine, right? Frank slapped Wally's back.
Never doubted you, old fella.
Yeah, of course. Frank, it's fine, huffed Wally sarcastically. The men now approached your closed bud. However, it was then 4 arm-thick vines broke with dirt, defensively whipping around. They were colored in a dark green and covered in dangerous-looking thorns. Their tips ending in pink flower buds, out of which a thick, large yellow spike was emerging. The tip dropping with a black, obviously poisonous liquid none of the puppets wanted anywhere near them. The men jumped back, except for Wally. "It's okay, it's me! It's me!" shouted the painter as he rushed forward. The vines retracted for a moment, allowing the yellow puppet man to press his body against the flower petals. "It's me. I'm with friends." "With friends, like I told you. Remember?" You blinked. Yes, that voice. You remembered who it belonged to. Your partner. Yes, your partner. And friends? What friends? You didn't have friends. You slowly opened one of your leaves, allowing you to look outside. There you saw the other puppets, all in a state of shock. Then you looked down at Wally. His assuring smile was enough for you to blossom your flower, revealing yourself to them.
"I can't believe it. She looks just like a normal puppet."
A dark green tint decorated your cheeks as you blushed, and even though your naughty bits were covered by leaves, you still felt quite naked and embarrassed. You had never seen so many puppets at once. A grey puppet with a permanent frown approached you, taking only small baby steps.
"This is fascinating, Wally. I need to study this specimen."
"We are going to get her home first," said Wally. And then Wally described what they were planning. You were going to be dug up. To avoid hurting you and your roots, you were ordered to keep them as tightly around you as possible, pointing at where it was safe to start digging. Each stab with the spade around you made you shudder. They were so close with the sharp metal object to your fragile roots that it triggered a flight or fight reaction within you. And since you couldn't really run and hide, it was incredibly difficult to resist the urge to defend yourself with violence. You gasped suddenly as you felt the cold steel sliding against your body like that. And for a moment you only saw red. A vine wrapped around poor Barnaby's hind leg, lifting him up into the air. "Yo, I'm sorry. What did I do? Please!" he shouted. Angrily, you slammed the dog on the ground, immediately putting the men on guard. Thankfully, Wally was there to defuse the situation, as Howdy helped the dog back on his feet. You scowled and angrily closed your flower again. "That hot dog better be a double one," growled Barnaby at Wally before continuing to dig. It took the men almost the entire day to dig you up, and it took them a while to figure out how to best set you down into the cart. But once you were set in the new soil, the men leaned against the cart, exhausted, sweating, blushing. You, meanwhile, tasted the dirt you found yourself in. It was a one-to-one mixture of super wet peat moss and perlite. You closed your eyes. Oh, how pleasant this was. Delighted, your roots explored every nook and cranny, only to realize the little room you were actually in. Afraid, you looked out of your bulb, only to come face to face with the realization that you were moving. You gasped and immediately ducked your head under your nectar. Wally and the others noticed your distress, as the smell of sweet honey filled the hot summer air.
Oh, that's swell. That motivates me, growled Barnaby as he pushed the cart with all his might. Going so fast, Frank and Eddie fell forward into the dirt.
Well, I was getting sick of pushing anyways, joked Eddie. Beneath your pedals, you watched lights and shadows cross by you. Your little plant brain could barely comprehend this. It was super scary. And after a while, the men started talking. It was muffled. You couldn't hear it. A new smell soon entered your nostrils. The smell of pollution, electricity, hot asphalt. You furrowed your brows. You didn't see it, but you were right now carted past Howdy Pillar's store. Oh, it smelled like fruits. A lot of them. A lot of different ones. Ones that you haven't smelled yet, but they were definitely fruit. And meat. Delicious raw meat. Meat. Your mouth watered. But just as quickly as you picked up on it, the pleasant scents were replaced by that of nature once again. You didn't see it, but you had finally arrived in the small park located at the western side of home. You heard more puppets talk excitedly before your protective petals, so you hid again under the nectar, creating a big bubble inside the gold liquid as you yelped because you were once again lifted out of your soil. But once that was over, it was truly over. That's how much you understood. Immediately your roots shot forward, digging as far and as deep as possible, exploring your surroundings. Sighing happily, you finally relaxed. Exploring would take a while, and it certainly would be fun. At some points the ground was incredibly hard and compact, and that was going to be difficult to dig through. Not to mention, it had barely any nutrients past a certain point. Meanwhile, outside, the men greeted the other villagers of home, happy that this was finally over. Sally and Julie were admiring your closed flower with oohs and ahs. They expected a big flower, but not this big. They were overjoyed. And soon you heard muffled music coming from the others. Yes, music. You never heard music before. Sure, you did hear Wally hum as the two of you were doing naughty things, but real music? Never. Peeking through your leaves, you watched them. They were eating, they were dancing, they all had such strange shapes and sizes. They were all laughing, they were all talking. And these two girls, standing in front of you, not having noticed that you were staring at them. The one on the left had a weird-shaped head, and the other one, her voice was super high-pitched, and she couldn't shut up. But then the smell of hot dogs entered your bulb. It was a magical smell. Cooked, seasoned meat.
Normally you just grabbed squirrels and frogs, or tore chunks of raw bloody flesh of deers, digesting it over a few days within you. But this was different. It was delicious, a civilized smell that you never smelt before. And that was when Wally approached you. A regular, basic hot dog in hand. "Ladies?" he said as he passed Julie and Sally. The painter stopped in front of you. Only the thin fabric petaled in the way. "I thought you might be hungry, especially after all that," he said softly. You lowered the leaf just enough for him to see your face. Before arms reached out of the opening, taking whatever he was offering to you. Closing the hole, he was left perplexed. Yet Jolie and Sally were completely losing their minds. Gently pressing his head against the flour, he heard you devour the hot dog. And he smiled. "Hey, Wally," shouted Barnaby from the grill. "Make me the double hot dog now, old chap, just as promised." That smell. Was that how this town smelled during the night? It was late now. The sun was gone. After the puppets had left you, you had finally felt the confidence to open your blossom again. And you had found yourself in what you could only describe as artificial nature. The trees, they grew too separate. There were paths, bushes, and patches of flowers too symmetrical to be wild. Here, the ground was hotter than in the forest, yet the air was cooler. It seemed like the lack of trees made it more windy. Your roots stretched as you noticed a water source to your right. It was a beautiful fountain. Though as you moved a vine into it to drink from it, a disgusting, poisonous taste spread throughout your body. You didn't know what they did to that water, but if you drank any more of it, you'd wilt and die. What was inside the fountain was indeed water, but they had added chlorine to prevent the growth of algae. Luckily, there weren't any holes in the fountain. That would be very inconvenient. Sure, your vines could absorb water directly, but your roots, they did it passively. So if they came in contact with that, the thought alone made you shudder. A group of birds flew over you, making your mouth water. In the forest, you had scared away all the birdies. You had been a bit too greedy and hungry in your early stages of life. Giddy, you imagined one of them landing on your vine, unable to escape fast enough from your vice grip. It would be a welcome meal. And that's when you shook. Tremors. Footsteps. Your defensive vines rattled dangerously as a cone of light breached through a rose bush. But it was false alarm. It was your partner with a flashlight. Retracting your spiny vines, you looked at him expectantly. As you watched Wally approach, the painter had decided to return to you after the party was over. He hoped that by now you calmed down enough so he could spend some alone time with you. You allowed him to step on your petals. He was dressed in a blue pyjama with a pair of big fluffy slippers. The puppet man sat down at the rim of your nectar. "Well, we finally did it," he said. His head turned to look at you. "Welcome home." You blinked in response. "Are you happy?" You didn't respond. I'll take that as a yes. Happily, he let his feet dangle. "Everyone is super excited for you to be our new neighbor, especially Frank. He's actually pretty nice once you get to know him." Meanwhile, you just stared down at him. There was something, though, that no one seemed to truly understand.
They saw your puppet parts, and the fact that your plant parts were made up of the same material, and assumed that you were just like them. But you weren't. After all, you were an ambush predator, always looking out for the next meal, with the only one spared from your feeding frenzies being the one you pair bonded with, meaning Wally. The painter was in for a lot of work in the future, keeping your feral appetite in check, as well as figure out your nature before anyone acted foolish around you. Your fingers wiggled above his shoulders as Wally was imagining the next couple of weeks with rose-tinted glasses. And when they grasped him, he yelped before being dragged into your nectar. Your flower closed as he was defenseless against your advances, pressing your lips on his as you tore at his clothes, your leafy, minty-tasting tongue plunging into his throat. Wally's eyes rolled back in enjoyment. I should have thought of that. Yet he giggled excitedly, returning your touches eagerly and lovingly. The painter could tell by your ravenousness that this would take all night, but he was used to that by now. And he was willing to give you his all, to pollinate you with the utmost care.